Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Family Matters interview series. Today, we're excited to be joined by Dr. William Mansbach. Hi, Dr. Mansbach. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Len. Nice to be here.
We're excited for the topic that you're going to be discussing. I know our families are going to be excited to hear about brain health and some approaches that they might be able to take to improve their overall health and, in particular, their brain health. Before we get started, would you mind doing a brief introduction? Tell our families a little bit about yourself, your current role, your experience.
Sure, happy to do so. So it's good to be with you again. By training, I'm a geriatric neuropsychologist. I spent a lot of time clinically, operationally, from a research perspective, trying to understand the various cognitive disorders that leave people with memory and other kinds of cognitive deficits that impact on everyday functioning. So my goal really is to try to give healthcare providers the right tools to help families and help patients who are out there function better in the context of having some sort of cognitive impairment, or better yet, to try to prevent that from actually happening, which is a good segue, I think, into our topic on managing brain.
Absolutely. So I know brain health can encompass a lot of different things. Would you mind giving your definition of brain health to the audience, giving us a little more information about what does that really mean?
That's a really good question and a really good place to begin because there are a number of formal definitions, like from the World Health Organization and so forth. But I think in lay terms, brain health is basically our current cognitive and psychological functioning that impacts on daily living. So to optimize brain health, we're trying to do all the things that we can do cognitively to have better performance and higher well-being. I like to think that as we experience improvement in brain health, we experience improvement in well-being too.
Great, thank you. I know a lot of the caregivers and family members that are on the call today are probably worried about both their loved ones' brain health as well as, their own and maintaining that wellness journey. That being said, caregivers can experience a lot of stress just by being a caregiver and having that responsibility. Can you tell us a little bit about the impact of stress on brain health? Is that something our caregivers should be mindful of?
Should be. You know, when I started really focusing on reducing psychological burden, that is the stress that caregivers provide, I first went to the literature, of course. You know, what have people really already discovered about this? And I was dismayed to learn, and this is going back many years, that caregivers for someone who has Alzheimer's disease or related dementia, who had been managing that person for 1 year or longer, was 5 times more likely to develop clinical depression. And actually, over the course of 3 to 5 years, 5 times more likely to develop dementia themselves relative to matched peers. So it got me thinking, well, what is it about caregiving beyond the obvious psychological burden that we can see? And we're left with really understanding burden in neurophysiological terms. And Len, all I mean by that is that there are stress hormones that we release in our body that help us cope, which are great in the short run. But when they're tripped all the time, in the long term, they begin to be destructive and they begin to degrade our central nervous system in a way that is measurable through looking at mood functioning and cognition and function in that way. So it's absolutely essential that caregivers look after their own well-being, their own brain health, not just so they can continue to take care of a loved one, but in a more personal way so that they can maintain or achieve a level of well-being that they deserve.
That makes sense. Our caregivers are so important to the health and wellness of their loved ones, but if you don't take care of yourself, you won't be there to really support that person. So making sure that there's something in place to give them that overall well-being is really critical. Are there any lifestyle changes or habits that our caregivers could implement, rather quickly or be mindful of that are sort of easy things they could just implement or start, today after hearing this discussion?
I think so. I don't think it's necessary to join a gym. I don't think it's necessary to kind of reach for the top. I think that there is some low-hanging fruit that people can hold on to. I do want to say, Lynn, though, in order to do that, a person has to accept the idea that they have to take care of themselves, just as you pointed out, before they can take care of someone else. And that it's a lifestyle. It's not an intervention. It's not like, okay, you have a urinary tract infection, so you take an antibiotic for 10 days. This is actually a way of thinking, a way of being, or a way of doing. So it becomes important. We advocate a program that well, the Brain Health 7, because there are 7 modifiable behaviors that people can do right now that will improve their well-being, improve their brain health, but lower their risk for depression, dementia, and all the functional problems that come from that. So just to list them very briefly, because I'm sure we'll talk about them in more detail. The first is physical activity, physical exercise. You only have to do 15 minutes a day to
Pretty
really get a
manageable.
lot of benefit. Yeah, it's not like you have to go to a gym for 15 minutes or for an hour or 50 minutes. This is important because many caregivers will say to you, I don't have time to go to a gym and do all those things. Who's going to look after my loved one? So I think 15 minutes, even 10 minutes, 10 to 12 minutes would be really important. The right kinds of cognitive exercise is really important. And this is where we have that opportunity cost. People can do things that are fun, good, could be crossword puzzles and things like that. But you really want to do exercises that have good science that improve those neural circuits of memory and the executive control function. So use well-scienced exercises. We call them working memory exercises. And at our place, at our center, we have a lot of them that we can suggest for people to do right now, today, very, very easily. This sounds a little hokey to some people, but the third modifiable behavior is what we think of as centered breathing. It's really important. Why is it important? It's because when we breathe, sort of that belly breathing, we're suppressing or holding back the stress hormones like cortisol, and instead we're promoting happy neurotransmitters like serotonin. So there's very credible, ample science, ample evidence that deep breathing a few times a day, even if it's for a few minutes, is really important. So those 3, by the way, a person can monitor themselves through an app called 15 for Me. So people can get in touch with us if they want to learn more about how to do a very easy app to maintain your brain health. The other 4 are in a different category. So one is sleep. Sleep is really important. Sleep is really hard to come by when you're the primary caregiver, isn't it? Yet, it's important that one has as much volume sleep as necessary because of the restorative effects of stage 3 or deep wave sleep and REM, rapid eye movement stage sleep. Those are really important for brain sort of maintenance. They are ways of managing beta amyloid and toxic proteins that are implemented in Alzheimer's disease. So sleep is really important. If you're having difficulty with that, talk to your doctor. We need to figure out a way to help you with sleep. Diet's very important for all the cardiovascular reasons that you can imagine. But you don't have to get crazy on this. I'm not a huge advocate, as you know, of supplements and things like that. I actually have a very sort of working person's approach, very kind of reasoned approach. Eat the things that are healthy, like leafy vegetables. Avoid the things that are not, like a lot of red meats. That doesn't mean you can never have, pork or beef or something of that sort, but do it in moderation. As the Greeks used to say, do things in moderation. That would be really important. If you want some guidance on this, you can check out something called the Mind Diet, M-I-N-D, where you can read about it, in our book, Brain Health as You Age. Try to understand, what can I do today that's reasonable. And by the way, if you're caring for someone else, maybe you're preparing food for someone else. What's good for you is going to be good for your loved one. Social or meaningful engagement is another one of the 7 modifiable behaviors. Again, really difficult when you're a caregiver. How do you have time to do this? So think of all the ways you can do it. Have somebody come by, use, FaceTime, use Zoom, pick up the phone. Don't try to run a marathon at sprint speed. Just try to build in incrementally, a little bit at a time, that meaningful engagement. It's really important. And the 7th one is managing your mood. Depression and anxiety, persistent anxiety, they're pretty commonly associated with caregiving. So you shouldn't just accept it as a fact, like there's nothing I can do about it. These are treatable through talking with someone, they're treatable through medications. They're actually treatable by doing the other brain health 7 activities, because you can see yourself actually making progress in some way. So those 7 things are modifiable. People can do them right away. They want more support, want to understand more about it, just contact us at the BCAT Research Center.
I think it gives you hope to think that there are some things you yourself can control, things you can implement, small changes you can make that lead to big and, positive changes for your overall health that aren't, complex or really difficult. It's just a matter of maybe swapping an ingredient here and there, or being intentional about some of those things you mentioned. I have a couple follow-up questions. You talked about mood and depression. If somebody maybe thinks they're, down, or they haven't had a professional to talk to about this, maybe they haven't seen their primary care doctor, is there any way for someone to kind of spot check that and really understand, where am I with my mood, and do I need to reach out to primary care and have a more detailed conversation about what I'm going through?
Yeah, so we have a consumer website, and there's an instrument, a screening tool called the M5 or the Mood 5. You can do it online. No one looks at your score. It's personal, it's private. It's not a diagnostic tool, it's just a screening tool, but it'll give you a lot of information about psychological burden or depression and anxiety that's contextual in some ways. So it's on the website enrichvisits.com. Anybody can use it. It's free, and that's a good starting point, because if you have an elevated score, it's confirmation that there's something that you need to do. And not only that, Len, those 7 behaviors, modifiable behaviors that are so important for maintaining and improving brain health. There's a calculator on Enrich Visits. Right now, it has 6 different modifiable behaviors, but it's being updated, actually. So people can use that to see, well, how am I doing in each category? I mean, what a great way to begin, right? Giving
Absolutely.
you some evidence for how you're doing. But for mood, the M5 is a good place to begin.
That's great. That's great that there's something out there that they can connect to today and really get a sense of, where am I and what do I need to do next? Can we circle back to sleep for a minute? You mentioned that it's important to brain health. Obviously, we want people to be well rested, but, are there any other implications if you're not getting enough sleep, that might impact your overall well-being?
Well, the indications for poor sleep are probably things that we all really recognize. One, of course, is fatigue, which in caregiving happens all the time anyway, but even more fatigue than normal. A kind of cognitive or mental dullness, that one of the things that happens with poor sleep. And if you don't believe it, just make yourself not sleep and then try to do detail-oriented things. It's really very difficult to do. In our brain, when we're tired, just finds a way of focusing on the major things, but not on the minor things. But it's the minor things, the details that we have to manage when we're taking care of somebody. So you can notice in that way. Also, when people don't sleep very well, it impacts on their physical health in other kinds of ways, right? So you're much more likely to be injured. You're much more likely to feel down. You're much more likely to have a change in your appetite. Sleep is like one of the most important activities of daily living. We don't think about it that way, but it really is.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think about when you're on a long distance drive and you start to get really tired, how you start to zone out, it's unsafe, you're not paying attention to the road. I imagine being in a chronic sleep state where you're deprived of sleep over time, you would really start to feel those effects.
Well, one thing just to encourage people, many people listening are going to say, well, my loved one is up at night or I can't seem to get sleep. There may be that diurnal shift in Alzheimer's disease where a loved one's up at night, maybe sleeping more during the day. Sleep can be forgiving, very forgiving in this respect. If you can't get 8 hours at night, try to get sleep when you can. The brain's very good at getting you to stage 3 sleep and REM sleep when you're sleep deprived faster than normal. So you have a 24-hour cycle to manage, not just the nighttime cycle. So you know what? If your loved one is sleeping during the day, maybe you can get your power nap then. So
That's good
think
advice.
about it as 24 hours.
Absolutely. You also mentioned cognitive exercises. And I know there's a lot of buzz. I've heard there's different brain games, things that are online, books that you can buy, Sudoku, things like that. Can you tell us a little bit about, what does the science really support around cognitive activities and exercises?
Yeah. So with respect to improving cognition, there's very little evidence that most of those programs, particularly the brain training ones, work. At our center, we try to create tools that do work, but of course they have to be validated by science. And there's this term that you hear in marketing, which is, this product, it's based on science. But based on science, a lot of things are based on science. Doesn't mean they're validated by science. So it's important that you use, exercises, cognitive exercises that are. So just to give everyone equal opportunity, my concern is just that people use whatever is helpful, whatever has been evidenced, with science to support that it's really good. Clearly, the working memory exercises that we develop have to go through those research protocols. They have to be validated by science. We just finished a more longitudinal study looking at our working memory exercises over time. How do people with mild cognitive impairment and mild stage dementia, which is a lot of our caregivers, have either of those statuses. If they do these exercises, like the working memory exercise, the workbook, or we have a digital platform that we use, people can access. We found that at 6 months and at 12 months, many people made improvements. So that's pretty remarkable that you can do that. So
That's great news for
certainly it is. And I don't know of studies that have shown a lot of longitudinal benefit for these exercises. And again, if you like doing them, do other ones, but don't count that as your cognitive, exercises to improve your brain health.
I know you mentioned around physical activity, even 10 to 15 minutes can be beneficial if you can fit it in. What do you recommend for the cognitive exercises? Is there a certain amount, or do you have to get so many right per exercise? Tell us a little bit about how that works.
You know what? If you can do optimally 5 times a day for 10 to 12 minutes, that's great. You can do not a day, a week. If you can do 3 times a week, it's okay. Less than that, you're not going to get a lot of benefit, in our experience and based on our research. So can you fit in, 10 to 12 minutes most days? You probably can. particularly for if you use the 15 for Me app, because you have it right on your phone. You don't have to go anywhere. So I think uh, I think it's quite doable to fit it into your day. So that's one way to kind of think about
Yeah, that wouldn't be too, I mean, if you're alternating, you've got your physical activity and your cognitive activities, it's really only about 30 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes. And that's certainly, can do it in the morning, can do it in the evening, try to fit it in. And for the benefit that you receive, it's really worth finding the time to incorporate that into your schedule.
Well, yes, and we have a lot of caregivers who use it sort of religiously, if I can use that term. They figured out a way to get their 10 to 12 minutes pretty much every day. And they look at it as their time. This is my time. I'm doing something for me. And that's enormously important to be able to do that.
If somebody felt that they maybe are having some subtle changes, maybe their families told them they're repeating themselves, or they feel that they're struggling a bit, and they're looking for a service to connect to. Maybe they want to have somebody, even if it's virtual, like you mentioned, sometimes transportation and caregivers don't have additional help. They can't leave their loved one. Are there any virtual services out there where a caregiver could connect to someone who is a brain health expert, where they might be able to work
Yeah,
together and help them create a specific plan that works just for them?
there is. And actually, what's emerging now in the wellness industry, just beginning, is brain health coaching. So it's not psychotherapy, it's not medication management, it's non-pharmacologic or non-medication based. Counterpoint Health Services does coaching virtually. You can be anywhere in the world and get a certified brain health coach. One of the nice things about Counterpoint is that they actually measure improvement over time. I mean, it's very important that it's evidence-based. It's not just, and that usually doesn't happen, by the way, with coaching and so forth, but Counterpoint's very focused on being able to say that there's evidence for what they actually do. So anyone can do that and can check it out. They have a website. Just Google, counterpointhealthservices.com. You can look for something called the National Brain Health Center, which is a resource-rich center that can help people understand these cognitive disorders and get the help that they need. So coaching is so important, Lynn, because the coach can point out what kinds of things each individual needs. It's very individual specific. Like, for example, you're working on the Brain Health 7, one person might need more help in cognition. One person may need more help in mood. One person may need to know, well, how do you do centered breathing? So the coach is your guide, your Sherpa, so to speak, to kind of take you through. And you can do it as long as you need, as long as you want. And it's not medical in that sense. It's very much a wellness model. I really recommend that people try to do that.
Like a personal trainer, but to help really guide you
Yeah,
what your goals are, what you specifically need to be the most healthy that you possibly can. That sounds like a great opportunity,
exactly.
especially for, I mean, that could be a great option for both the caregiver and their loved one, if their loved one could benefit as
Right.
well.
Sure. And in fact, we've seen people who do coaching, and the coach does some work with the identified caregiver and the identified person that's being cared for, and they're different kinds of things, right? Because they have different needs, different points in time. So sure, absolutely within the scope. Just again, it's like anything else. Make sure that you go to Counterpoint, but if you want to go somewhere else, sure. Just make sure that they're certified, that they have evidence for what they do, maybe some publications and peer-reviewed journals. Again, there's a lot. Brain training and brain health is a multi-billion-dollar industry, Lynn, and most of it, unfortunately, has no real evidence to it. So I want to make sure that people are steered in the right direction.
Yeah, it can be difficult to navigate the landscape of all the different options out there to find the one that's going to work for you. So I'm glad we're
Okay.
able to offer a couple of referrals and resources to folks so that they can at least be pointed in
Sure.
the right direction. I have two follow-up questions. I know we're almost out of time. You mentioned earlier, in talking about the Brain Health 7, that social connection and the boost in well-being with being connected to others. I think we all saw during COVID how people who were isolated really struggled. You know, families struggled with not being able to see each other. Folks weren't able to do the things they like to enjoy, their leisure activities, participate in group activities. Do you have any suggestions of some specific ways that that emotional well-being and social connection can be boosted? What types of things should people be
Sure.
looking to participate in? If right now they don't have any opportunities, how could they build that for themselves?
Right. So the first thing is everyone's different in terms of their social needs. And I'm not really talking about just socializing like going to a party and so forth. I'm actually talking about a term called meaningful engagement. And it's sort of like the high value conversations or time that you spend with people. What makes it high value? Well, sure, you enjoy them, but it's you have a sense of belonging and identity. You know, they're like one of your folks. They're people who you feel like you can relate to. It's really helpful when you've had shared experiences. It's good for your memory and all that kind of thing. So, how do you do it? I think the first thing you do is we ask people to do a social network map. It's sort of funny. You draw like three concentric circles, one circle and then one outside that circle and one outside that. And you put the names of the people who are your confidants in the middle one. Like, is there anyone in your life that you feel like you can tell almost anything, or if you had the chance, you get a lot of support? In the middle ring, it would be people where you can get some of that, but they're important to you, but they're not key in your life. And the third would just be acquaintances that you come into contact with, right, from time to time. So if you look at that, you'd want to then say, well, what's important from a brain health perspective is that I have at least one person that I can share some of my concerns and worries with, that I can get that additional support, that I can find meaningful engagement. So you look and see, well, is there anyone in that middle circle? And if there is, then make sure you make some connections. You might even say things like to them, like, I'm not going to always be great at reaching out. I'm kind of overwhelmed by my situation. Would you just keep checking in with me? That might be one strategy you might have. There are people who find no one in the middle and they need someone. And then you look at the most immediate circle outside of that. Is there anyone that could be moved into that inner circle, from time to time? So I think you do this mapping of your social support system, and you make a commitment. And then, by the way, it doesn't have to be hours a day or a week or anything like that. It's just keeping an emotional lifeline, a social or meaningful engagement lifeline out there. And I think today, with all the different ways of connecting with people, it's actually easier than what it used to be. And
Definitely.
you had mentioned COVID, Lynn. What we understand about the literature, research literature with COVID, is that people who did not do what I'm describing did not do well during COVID.
I mean, that makes sense. It's so important to feel you at least have someone out there. I love the word lifeline, having that connection to the outside
Yeah.
world to feel like you are connected. These are all such great suggestions. I think it's giving people lots of things to think about, lots of ways to improve their overall health. If they're not already tuned into what brain health really is, this gave them a nice overview. If they're doing some of the Brain Health 7, but not all, they can start incorporating some of these other aspects and continue on that journey. I know we're almost out of time. Can you run through again the resources you mentioned throughout our time together today, just so we can make sure folks have
Sure.
sort of a short list of where to go and what to look for?
Right. To find a coach, you can contact Counterpoint Health Services. It's in Columbia, Maryland, but it's a virtual, group. So they have within their scope the National Brain Health Center. and you can find a coach and a lot of resources there. People are concerned about their mood functioning. They can do the M5 or the Mood 5. A great resource is a free website called enrichvisits.com. People can look at that online and check that out in some ways. I really advocate that people do some sort of brain health calculator. You can do one on that Enrich Visits website. As I said, it's going to be updated to have the whole BH or Brain Health 7 that I had described in some ways. If you're interested in sort of an overview of brain health, the book Brain Health as You Age is something that a person can get on Amazon or bookstore or kind of wherever they want to do that. It's just kind of a background on how do you do all this stuff. And that might be useful. People really want to check out 15 for Me. You can find out about it actually from enrichvisits.com if you want to. Try to understand how that might work and see if that would be helpful for you. And of course, there are these working memory exercises that can be done digitally. If you're interested in that, you can check out the website, thebcat.com, and you can check it out that way. If you're interested, if you're the type of person that doesn't want to do anything online, but wants to do something in a workbook that has really good science, there's a BCAT working memory exercise book, home edition. You can find out about that on that enrichvisits.com website.
Great. These are great references. We'll put those up for our participants who are viewing today's interview. We'll put those up at the end so everyone can access those and find those links and be able to get in touch with those resources. Dr. Mansbach, this has been a great topic. It's been really helpful to hear this comprehensive overview on brain health. We so appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Happy to be with you.
All right, that concludes today's interview. Thanks everyone for taking the time to join, and we'll see you for the next Family Matters. Take care.